is for us. Art is for us. It nurtures our soul, helps us grow, helps us get to that calm space, and then brings us joy. And then as a result, I think that energy's on the piece and it'll bring other people joy.
Good day, spiritual artists. This is Chris Miller, your host for the Spiritual Artist Podcast. It is a cool fall day here in Dallas. And, I love finding people to share something that I'm thinking about. And I feel like spirit leads me to exactly what I need to hear at the time. And I'll be honest, this last year, if you've been following the podcast, you'll know that I left my corporate job. It was a nice paying job. And I've ventured out to run my art business and my podcast and my book. Everything's going great. But something I noticed about myself is that I've been more and more focused on how do you make the money? How do you make the money? And, we recently had someone in here, a gallery owner, talking about how to approach galleries. And that is all very valid. But when I met this person, and she is a printmaker in Las Vegas, New Mexico, I met her in Santa Fe at the Santa Fe Railyard Artisan Market. And so I want to introduce Julie Sola, and she is currently operating Fat Crow Press in the small town of Las Vegas, New Mexico, which I have to go visit. So good morning, Julie. How are you?
Good morning. I'm great. Thanks. Happy to be here to talk to you.
I am so excited. I don't know if you remember when I came up to your booth, I love your work. I love the colors, and there's a graphicness to them. It's a simple, I was a graphic designer by trade. And so I love that there's this wonderful, strong subject in each one. And so I'm excited to have you on the podcast.
Well, thank you. No, my work is yeah, graphic is definitely the key there. I just love a story. Like everything has to entertain me, and so there's always a central character in each of my prints.
Yeah, I noticed in your bio, you were talking about how I guess your roots are in Mexican culture. And you were talking about how a lot of times animals represented a way to communicate a story for people that might not be able to read. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, the history of print, especially in Mexico, the way to get the word out to the, workers was all imagery. So you didn't need words. You just explained it all with images. And a lot of times animals were used. And I like to use animals just to kind of convey a story. And it's a lot of times it's up to the reader to kind of interpret what they're seeing.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite animal, or do you kind of just love a lot?
I love them all. I mean, I call Fat Crow Press because the crow to me is like the big boss. And he's loud and always around and just kind of like no matter how much if you're in your head and worried about stuff and then you go outside and the crow just like is up there squawking to bring you out of it. It's like he's like he doesn't, it's like get a grip and start moving on.
You know, I
So that's
I, I
why I
think
look at him.
I think it's funny. I love that too. I have more and more been interested in crows. I did some research on them and found out that they're like one of the most intelligent animals. I mean, that they actually can recognize certain people. And I read that they'll get to the point they'll know if you're friendly, and they'll come closer to you, and they'll know if you're not. Literally, they can identify. I read this online. The car that you drive, they can actually make that relationship between that is Chris's car and he's friendly to me. And when you pull up, he'll stay around. It's very fascinating.
I know. I love them. I always, love the stories where people have, raised them or rescued them or they bring them gifts. And yeah, they're really intelligent and they're really noisy, which I love.
They are very noisy. And what's fascinating, I want to share this with my listeners because sometimes I'll sit out when I go to Santa Fe and I write poetry and I listen to the sounds. And when a crow flies over you, the sound of their wings, it's so quiet, but the sound of that flapping noise, it's just amazing, right?
Yeah, exactly. I totally agree. And they're everywhere.
They
So it's just,
are universal animal in a way, aren't
yes,
they?
yes,
So
exactly.
what I want to share with our listeners is when I was talking to you, I think I have been feeling this sense of how to make money, and I've always painted from within. When I create, I sit down, I get quiet, I get grounded, and then I just let it happen. Um, and so when I was talking to you, I said, well, do you do that? Do you try to paint for something that will sell or something that just comes from your heart? And you were so quick to answer that. And you were like, nope, I just paint for myself.
Yeah.
So
No, everything I do is, yeah, it's for me. And it has to make me happy, and it has to be something that, yeah, that I'm interested in and get excited about and want to draw and then carve and then print, because it's a process. And it has to be something that, yes, that excites me. And I cannot worry about trends and, yeah, the latest thing. Because sometimes people come in and go, oh, what's the latest thing? What's the coolest thing that's happening right now that everybody's buying? And I'm like, I don't know. I go, they just have, it's like whatever. Like I joke, like I have roadrunners that I just did a series of roadrunners, and it's roadrunners with their hairstyles. So it's not like a realistic roadrunner. I started off thinking I was going to do a realistic roadrunner, and then it turned into 6 roadrunners with different elaborate hairdos. And so I always joke with the other artists that are selling at the market, at the end of the day, I'm like, oh, it was a roadrunner day today, or it was a crow day today. As long as people are happy. And when I hear them laughing, I always have to see which one are you looking at. And then we have the dialogue, and I tell them the little backstory of where it came from. And then they have their own story that they can relate to with it. So it just has to come from the heart. And then the other thing I always tell young artists when they're trying to, or not even young artists, it's just artists of whatever phase they are in life, and they're trying to, yes, oh my God, my stuff's not selling and I need to make this. And what do I do? And maybe I should do this. And I go, no, you got to stick to what makes you happy. And my philosophy for myself is, if I like it, if I create something and I like it and it brings me joy, there's got to be other people out there like me that are going to resonate to it. So that's just what keeps me going.
I think it's true. And that's one benefit of this worldwide market that we live in, because you can find those people. So, if there are people that are looking for road runners with fancy hairstyle, you'll find them.
Right. And they don't even know they're looking for them. They just see it and they're like, oh, I have to have this.
It's interesting. I went to a art tour this weekend to someone's house, a friend of mine, and she was saying that she is fascinated with bugs, like bugs, and she draws bugs. And she said to me, I know that a lot of people get turned off when they see me drawing a big beetle. She'll do these big, beautiful beetles with color and everything. And she goes, but I love it. And I just have to do it.
Yeah. That's the whole point of why we create. I mean, I would hope so anyway. It's why I create. And when you talk to other artists that you resonate with, they're all creating, making things that they just have to do this.
It's like an obsession, right? I mean,
Yes. Yeah. Well, you coming from a graphic design background, it's different. And I worked in a 144-year-old letterpress shop where it was graphic design. We were designing, but it was all tangible. We were holding, 100-year-old type, and everything was physical, but we were still laying out a design, getting it done for a client. So in that respect, I understand production, and it's not your big piece of art. You're just creating something cool, but you're also getting it done and getting it out so you can move on to the next job. So that job gave me discipline as far as production goes, to where with my type of printmaking, you have the block, and then I can reprint that block. And I usually change out backgrounds and do all different types of things. And I call my blocks characters, so that my crow shows up in many different scenes and different things like that. But a graphic design background, a lot of times it is hard to break off to just do your art when you're like, for me, when I was first doing that, I was like, oh, but it doesn't have words on it, and it's not serving a purpose for this client, or telling something. And so I had to break away from that, and mainly because I don't have all that wood type, so that I could just start making the narrative with just my characters again, with no words.
yeah. It's almost like you have to. I agree with you. It was such a benefit for me to learn how to be creative for a client quickly. Oftentimes you get an assignment on Monday, you have to understand, not only that, but you have to understand what they want.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
then reach it, whether it's the color or shape or whatever they want. And I'm really good at that. But
Yeah.
it's almost like I'm now letting myself unlearn that a little bit,
Yes. Yeah. That's
because
exactly right.
yeah. And so I think, and I will share this because I said this to, on my recent podcast. I think it's an and statement. I'm not saying it's wrong to sell. Of course, it's great. It's great when someone sees your image and loves it.
Yeah.
But I always think start with yourself, right? Start here and then see what happens,
Yes, yes, and there's nothing wrong with making money with our art. There's
Right.
nothing wrong with that, and we should be paid for what we do. And there is nothing. It's a lovely feeling when somebody loves your work and they're excited and they want to pay for it. Just like when you see something that you love, you don't think about, well, I don't know, maybe I should ask, see if they'll take less for that, or you're happy
Mhm.
to purchase that piece of artwork for them because you've met the artist, you've talked to the artist, you have a bond with them now, and you're taking that piece and you know the story behind it. So we should get paid for what we do. But yes, we can. There's that whole the battle of the money, money. We got to make enough money, and especially when you leave a job that pays you well, and then you go to do your art. There's that big expectation of where, oh well, I used to make this amount of money with my day job, so now I need to make that much money with my art, and that's hard. That'll really, for me personally, will inhibit or put a lot of stress to sell my work. And I
I'm
do battle with that sometimes, definitely, because we all have to pay bills.
Yeah, we're in this real world. But
Yeah, we
but
have bills.
I love what I've done with that, and what I continue to do, and I encourage listeners to, is I look at abundance in many different ways, and it's not just money. Abundance of flexibility. Like I get up this morning, it's a Thursday morning, and I'm not forced to sit in a conference room at a table. I'm getting to talk to you. And
Yes,
there's so much abundance in that, you know?
that's the key right there. Is every day I get up, I go into my studio, it's my schedule, and I work. I mean, I'm very disciplined. Like I joke that I'm the harder boss on me than anybody else could be because I just love what I'm doing, and I just feel like I have all these ideas and I want to keep creating and creating and creating. And but yes, we're very fortunate. I say that every day. I'm like, I am so fortunate. I can do this. I can just go in my studio. I'm my own boss. I'm creating things, and I don't take it for granted. I'm just so happy. We've all had jobs. We all probably still have jobs. And it's just so nice to spend my energy for me now, creating things that make me very happy and make some people happy.
Yeah, I think that looking at it that way, it frees me up too, to say, instead of that salary, I have a freedom of schedule, and I can do these things, and I can paint every day, and I can
Yes.
create. And so you start listing. I would encourage the listeners, you list all those things of abundance that you have in your life. And
Yes.
and to be honest with you, it was affecting me physically, that corporate job. Like physically, I have abundance of health now because all those issues fade away.
Exactly. Oh no, exactly. And it's like that's exactly right. When you start doing, when you feel like you allow yourself to just do what it is you've been wanting to do all along and create art, whatever that form is, whether it's music or 3D or whatever it is, when you finally get to that point where you're like, I'm just going to do this. This is what I'm going to do. It's very freeing. It's scary, but it's very freeing once you start doing it. And yes, and you can't focus on, yeah, the bottom line. Like, oh, if I don't sell this much today, then you just have to trust. And it is scary. I have this favorite quote of mine that a friend sent to me, and it's you will either step forward into growth or you will step backward into safety. And it's
Mm,
Abraham Maslow. And I love that. Every time I start getting a little, we all have moments, we have our like, oh, like it wasn't a good day at the market or something, and you just have to, I just think of that quote and it's like, yeah, you just have to be brave and keep moving.
yeah,
And
I
art
love.
is for life. I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. There's no cutoff, you just keep creating.
It's funny, when I started, I talked to a woman, and before I left the job, it was like my last couple of weeks, and she was a freelancer, and she said, "It's funny, Chris, you'll find that the money comes, the abundance comes in different directions. You might make a little here from teaching, and a little here from selling art, and a little here from speaking." And she says, "But at the end of the year, you make it."
Yeah.
And I do believe that we are supported, by a greater power, and it directs us to, and that's a big part of my messaging, to find who we are. And you are crows, and so I want to talk about that, let's talk about these road runners, and your process of discovering them. So how did that happen? How did you get inspired?
Well, I've always loved roadrunners. And, I grew up in Southern California. My family's from New Mexico, but my mom went to college out there and met my dad. So, but every summer we were in New Mexico, and I would see them as a kid, and it was my grandma's favorite bird. And I just was always fascinated by them. And horned toads. Oh
Oh
my
yeah.
God. Just fascinated by these little dinosaurs. But then over the years, especially in the past few years, I'd see less and less of them, and they became more and more like, when you finally did see one, it was like, oh my God, I finally got to see one. And in the last few years, I have not seen any. And I'm here in Santa Fe or in Las Vegas because my mom's here in Santa Fe. So I split my time because I do stuff with my mom. And I haven't seen any. And so I finally saw one, and I was like, oh, okay. And then I haven't carved a roadrunner. Of all the birds, I love birds. I carve a lot of different birds and print them. So I thought, all right, I need to carve a roadrunner. And I do this when I'm at the art market. I carve there, and so that people can see how I do this, and they get to, and I bring blocks so they can print. And so I started off, like I said, I was going to do this majestic roadrunner, the full body, and do this amazing background. And then I don't know what happened. I just ended up doing just their heads and all of their crazy hairstyles. Not that they all have crazy hairstyles, but I made them that way. And I write children's books too. So it's like, this is little characters. And so I carved them to where they're looking at each other. And it's like this whole little thing's going on that people can make up. I don't know. It just happened. And then I ran with it. Not thinking, yeah, of course, going, oh, I should do a realistic roadrunner because that's what people love. And instead I'm like, no, I'm doing these guys,
Oh, so I
So
love
I
it.
don't know. I just ran with it.
So you
And
started
it
with the
makes me
idea.
laugh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I start with an idea and then I just start sketching it out. A lot of times I draw right onto linoleum, especially because they're more cartoony, so I just draw them out on linoleum and then I carve them and print them. And right now I'm making a shadow box with them. I decided, because I love to make shadow boxes. I haven't done it in years. And I thought, oh no, these need to go in a shadow box now with cactus. So that's what I'm working on right now.
Oh, it sounds wonderful. In fact, if you can send me a few of those images, and I can slide them across the screen so people
Yeah.
can see your work. And I know you run this store, and it's online too, right? People can find you online. So
Yes, they can find me online. I have a website. A lovely young woman in Las Vegas built my site for me because computers are definitely not my area. And so she built my website, and I have a few things on there, but a lot of it talks about the historic building that my husband and I own. We sold our home in Tennessee and moved back to New Mexico. And we bought this old building, which we love. And so I have my print studio on the first floor with my antique presses. And then the front of it's a little gallery with a lot of local art and mostly print from my friends all over the United States. And yes, I'll be working on probably winter. I'll have more items online, including my friends' art to sell. But that's just, I try to give myself one day a week to work on the computer, but it's a big learning curve. So rather just
well,
be carving and printing.
I love is how you describe what you just described. I live in this historic building. I'm upstairs. Downstairs is a storefront. It's so talk about abundance, right?
Yes,
I mean, everybody listening to this is going, wow, I would love that,
I know. And that's how it used to be. You would live upstairs and you'd have your shop downstairs. And it's like, as we say, we all come from the circle. And I just love it. I mean, yeah, I'm upstairs and then I go downstairs and work in my studio and I open my doors. And a lot of times, retail up there, I'm not making my money doing that there, but I feel like the people that come in, they get to see this beautiful old building that we love and cherish. And they get to see my old presses and what I'm doing. So I'm basically an open studio. I'm right there printing. They can see me work. And that's really what I love about it.
I watched a show this week on, I think it was on Prime, and it's about makers, and they talk about different artists across the country that craft makers and makers of furniture and pottery and print and baskets, weaving those beautiful
Yes.
baskets. And I think there's such a spiritual experience when we create like that. And
Yes.
it's almost like when they talk about industrialization and taking a factory and jamming it out, I think we've lost this wonderful part of being human, you know?
Yeah, that's so funny because I've been watching Craft in America,
Oh,
PBS thing. Oh my
that's
God.
it. That's
Yeah,
what I was
Craft in
watching.
America. Yeah, that's all I've been obsessed on that because it's such a good series and it's all these amazing crafters, artists. And yes, and that's their message is that being back to doing things with our hands and things that they learned maybe from their culture. And I mean, I credit my grandmother for a lot of what I do because she grew up, on ranches. Her father was a foreman and she, played with clay. They made everything. And so growing up, she taught me how to cook, and I learned everything from her. It was there weren't nothing was written down. You just learned it from watching and her telling. And that is like that Craft in America. It's just like the stories we pass it down or pass it along to other people by showing them how and what we're doing. And that's what I love. I love spreading the whole love of printmaking and what an accessible form it is. And that's what I tell people all the time that they can buy a kit for like $25. You don't need a press. And it's just, there's just no excuse. You can do it.
Yeah. And it's just that process, that handing it down from one generation to the other, that connection with the people that brought you onto this planet, right? Just that.
Yes.
And I've been watching the show too. It's so funny. It is the PBS show. I guess they're
Yeah.
running it through Prime. Um,
Yeah.
and I just am fascinated. Something I just sit there and watch how people, it's part of it is communing with nature. So many of them, right?
Yes.
They go out and they sit in in nature and they see the reeds blowing and then they choose the ones to weave with. And
Yes. Especially that one. I remember that one. Yeah. No, it's amazing. And the
yeah,
children learning, that's what's really exciting. Taking pride in their culture and also a handcraft. Nobody's on their cell phones. They're sitting around together like the quilters.
right.
They're not on their cell phones. They are sitting there talking with each other and creating. And they've been doing that forever. But we're just, in our day and age with, everything so quick and fast and right at our fingertips, it's just nice to slow down and do things with our hands. I guess, like people say you unplug, and it's true. You just get to do your art. And like again, going back to how fortunate we are that we can just go, you get an idea and go, oh, I'm gonna go make that. I mean, what a
Yeah,
wonderful thing. I
it is
think
a wonderful.
everybody has that ability. Is just letting yourself do it.
Yeah, it's wonderful, and it's there's such a meditative experience when you do it. In fact, I am I like to tell painters, I see this trend. It's almost the opposite. On Instagram, there's this huge trend for people to show how fast they're doing something. I'm doing it. Look how fast I'm doing it.
No, and our
Uh,
life is so sped up anyway. It's like,
I
no,
know. And I keep telling people, slow down.
yeah,
It's not about finishing the painting. It is not about
no,
finishing it. It's
yeah,
about, in fact, I have a project that I recommend to people is to start a project and decide I will not finish this. You know, I'm going to let it
yes,
stay in a total state of evolvement. It's just going to
yes.
keep evolving. And so I think that is so important to the creative process to be present and just slowly let it
I
unravel, right?
know. Well, and I know, but like going back to the graphic design background, or with me with Hatch, which we were designers, is like we had deadlines. It's like, so yes, it's like getting out of that get it out, get to the next one, get it out, get to the next one. It's like it takes some time to slow down. Yes. I have some prints that I've been working on. Oh, they take months, the ones with all the crazy printing on it. And I'll go back like today, I'll drive back to the studio and I'll look at it. And I'll look at the 4 or 5 that I've been working on for months. Some have sat there for a year. And then I'll see if I get inspired to do any more to them. It's just fun to do for me to do that.
I agree. I have a painting that, it's been hanging on my wall for 3 months, but now I'm like, I look at it again. I go, oh, that's not balanced. I need to, I
Yeah.
need to change that, and I need to fix that. And I think that's the fun part, right? To just
Mhm.
let it slowly grow into being
Yes.
something.
Yeah, you walk away and then you look at it with fresh eyes and see something that you would obviously didn't see when you were last working on it. But it's so nice. Yeah, I have things. Yeah, I tape them to the walls and I'll just live with them. Sometimes I won't even look at them. I'll just walk by them like hundreds of times, and then one day I'll stop and be like, "Oh, okay." And I love that. I love that.
What I love to share is when I'm in that process of creating, and when I slow down. For example, sometimes I'll do a painting where I'm just working on the line work very slowly. When I'm in that space of presence, for me, that's when intuition and spirit speak to me. That's when suddenly I go, I want to put crazy hairdos on these.
Yes,
It's like it
I
opens
know.
that place, right?
Yeah, and you just run with it. Of course, sometimes, when I'm creating something, I'll get a crazy idea. And then I start working on it, and halfway through, I'm like, "Oh, what am I doing?" For a minute, that little voice, that little doubt comes in, and then I'm like, "Nope, I'm just gonna keep on going." And you just keep working on it. But yeah, I always tell, because people will ask me, "Well, how do you draw this out all in full detail and then get to it?" And I said, "Well, I come up with the idea, then I start sketching, and then I just immediately start carving and start working on it." And then I always say that if I can picture it in my mind, pretty sure I can get it out on paper. May look a little different from what I had in my mind, but I just stay strong to that vision. If I have that vision, then I can definitely get it out there.
Oh yeah, I love that. And just keep holding to that vision, right? You
Yes,
know?
you just keep holding to it and knock that little doubt voice away if it pops up, and then just keep going. Because
Yeah.
yes, it's a process. And it's like, yeah, like this shadow box I'm working on. Like I said, I haven't done one, oh my God, in probably 10 years. And then I want to submit to a show this piece. And of course, the deadline's coming up, and I'm like, instead of just putting something in that I've already created this year, I'm like, oh, I'm going to do this elaborate shadow box. And yeah, it's kind of crazy, but I'm bound to determined to keep going with it.
That's great. So it just one day you were probably working on those on the blocks, and that idea just came to you, the connection.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause I have the prints that I made of the Roadrunners. And then yeah, no, I had the vision of this box. So I printed the background because I had this in my head, and I'm like, oh, and they're just like these little cartoony white clouds on a turquoise sky. Anyway, I love it. I'm in love with what I'm doing. So I'm just going to keep going.
Well, I think it shows. That's why I stopped at your booth. I used to run a market here in Dallas, and I had about 80 exhibitors. And when I picked people, I always picked them for what I called being conscious workers. Like you can
Mhm.
see if someone's really, and I get frustrated when people say art is, you know, oil on linen, and that's the only thing that can be art. I'm like,
Oh, I know.
I get so frustrated with that, because no, weaving a basket is an art form, making a beautiful block, a print block. Because if your consciousness is there, if I can see the love and attention and presence that you're putting into it, and that's how I would pick my artists.
Yeah, and that's true because I mean, being a printmaker, I'm a relief printmaker, and that was never considered fine art. It was always lithography and all the different ones, but I just never thought about it like that. For something that I know, and I didn't go to art school, so this is a medium that I learned through Hatch, and I'm just like, it just resonates with me and it's something I know that I can do. And so I just stick with it. But yes, it has to be, again, going back to I have to create what I love. It has to make me happy. And the other thing too is like, I'm not, you know, I don't have a big message. I'm not trying to change the world, but if it makes people happy and I see them laugh or they get enjoyment, then that makes me feel good.
Well, you obviously, I should share, you've created some books. And now, are those available online or just through your store?
They're available online. I always encourage people to order them through their independent bookstores, and they're online in most independent bookstores. And if not, you can ask for them. But they are on, of course, Amazon and all the different ones. And then they're on my website if somebody wanted them signed. But they're out there. And those I created, they're all linoleum cuts, and I hand set the type and hand printed the original books, and then was lucky enough to get a publisher to pick them up.
Wow, that's cool. Now, how about the story in them? How do you come up with your stories for those?
So I've always loved children's books. Who doesn't? I've collected them, and the goal was always to write one. And the first one that I was going to write that I never did write, but what started it all, I worked on a sheep ranch in southwestern New Mexico, and I had a cattle dog. She was a healer and she was a puppy. And so she grew up on this ranch in her first few years. And so she was a serious little worker. She
Yeah,
was
they
a
are.
hardworking little dog. And so I wanted to write a book about her, and it was going to be, her name was Mickey's Life on the Ranch. So it would be an educational, like a day in the life of a dog on the ranch. And so I always had that idea for years and years and years. I mean, I was 19 when I worked on that ranch. So this was many, many years ago. So when I finally decided to just write my book, mainly it's images. I don't claim to be a writer, it's images. And so my dad rescued this little dog, Milo. You named him Milo. And this little dog was just such a big presence in our lives. And he, like dogs love to run fast. Well, he just like lived for it, And so I'm like, I have to write this book called Run Fast Milo. So it took me, years of just sketching out because I would put it aside. And then finally, I turned 40 and I said, oh my God, okay, enough. Just get your book done. So I did. I just finished it, and I hand printed it because I thought, well, I'm a printmaker. I can print my own books. And I did. And then I self published them for a little while and then got a publisher. And then Possum Dreams happened. I don't know how Possum Dreams happened. I was part of a art co-op in Nashville, and we all had to sit the gallery, and I was sitting, we were about to have, we had shows every month. So we were going to do a mini print show. So I was sitting there with my little piece of paper that I knew the size had to be. And I started doing a little thing called dog tricks. And it was a dog with a little ball in his nose. And then I thought, what about a possum? Because I got that long snout. So I started doing possum tricks. And then it turned into Possum Dreams. And then that was the next book. So I don't know. It just came and I just went with it.
It's
Not even
interesting.
thinking about anything like, oh, will this sell? Will people like it? It's like I just had to do this, and I did. And it's and I've sold a lot of the books, but people just love. It's a simple story,
Mm.
visual. It's mostly visual, very little words.
Well, it's funny. There's certain things there that I would call part of your creative DNA. You look at something, you start with something real. So you're starting with something real that you see, whether it's the dog or the road
Yeah,
runner. And then you start with a literal interpretation. And it sounds like once it goes through you, it becomes whimsical. It's like it
yeah.
has this
And
funniness.
the whimsy thing is real important too. I mean, it's not like I set out to make it whimsical. It's just where it goes, and yeah, it just made I want to be happy. And I love, like I said, when people are looking through my prints and I hear them giggling or talking to the other person, like, oh my God, look at this, and they're laughing. I'm like, that makes me so happy because I start cracking up and I tell them the story. And so, yeah, the children's books are happy. Yeah, there's no moral of the story in my books. It's just happy. And I have more on my shelf ready, waiting to get done. I need to dust them off and get back to them, but and they're just happy because it's mostly visual. I just love these happy images.
Yeah, your color sense is very bright and cheerful. Most of the stuff I saw on display has very almost pure color, very bright, strong color.
Yes, I love color. And and I know how to mix very basic colors. So I buy my primaries and then I just mix a little bit. I have my Pantone book and that's how I
Oh, do
try to
you?
get yes, I could try to get a few different ones, but I pretty much make the basic colors.
It's funny you say that. I do that. I'll see a magazine or something, and I'll see a color, and I'm like, I want that color.
Yeah.
It's just such as that green. I have to have that green.
Oh, like the hollyhocks this year in my neighborhood. I mean, some of them were just this incredible color. And I took a picture and I'm like, I have to have that color in something I'm doing. Yeah.
So
It's
yeah,
exciting.
it is. That's part of your creative DNA too. Is you just get the color because I love your
Yeah.
sense of color.
Yeah.
I, I
Color is
love I love this conversation because it gives me goosebumps because I that's that excitement. And I think as an artist, that's where you start. You start with the excitement, the idea of something, and go with it. And when we start looking outward, like, oh, can it sell or this or that? I think it pulls us away from center, you know?
absolutely. This friend of mine, she's an artist, amazing artist, and she's older, and she is tormented by oh, my stuff isn't selling. Maybe I need to do this. And then maybe, okay, well, I got to do this. And you can just feel the anxiety coming from her. And I'm always, we have talks, and I'm just like, just continue doing what you love. You can't keep chasing the next fad or looking at what other people are selling and how come they're selling so well and I'm not. It's, and when she does, just like anybody, she'll finally like calm down and then she'll start doing what she loves. And of course she'll sell a piece, but it's just, she has that turmoil so much. And it's like, I get it. I mean, like I said, that little doubt comes in every now and then, but then, yeah, you just got to keep going. Like I print rats with pastries. I'm like, I don't know. It's just cute. It cracks me up, you know? It's like I just want, and they're just simple little prints. So yeah, and that's the other thing too. I keep my prices. It's all across the range so that I get a lot of young people coming in and they're buying their first print or they know they can get something for $25, which I always try to have 25, 15. And then, like my highest price is $400. Regardless of that, there's always something that people feel they can come in and they can buy something. They won't feel intimidated or they got to, afraid to come into my space. And that's real important to me. I want it accessible because that's important to me.
Mm, I love it. I love it. I was going to go back to what you said. I try to explain this to people. When you're in anxiety, if you're in anxiety, then you're cutting yourself off from that intuition, that connection.
Ab- Absolutely. You're spinning. It feels like you're spinning and just, yeah. Yes.
You're isolating yourself from everything else. It's like that electrical current. You're cutting it off. And you don't ever want to do that. Stay in joy, stay in excitement, stay in laughter. And that's where boom, 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 right? You get that impulse.
Yes.
And it's that
Ex-
creative impulse, right?
Yes. That's so important. And again, I know it's not easy because, we have that little, I don't know, struggles. A lot of people, times we struggle. It depends on our mood or what the planets are doing or who knows anything or what's happening in the world. But for me personally, I find that when I go to my studio and I just start looking at, like, I'll pull up in my flat files and look at prints that I just didn't feel were finished or for whatever reason just ended up in my flat files. And then I'll go back and revisit those and it'll spark a new conversation with it or it'll spur me on to do this other thing. And then I have all my little notes everywhere. I'm very tangible. I have everything on little pieces of paper. And I'll go through my stack of paper and go, oh, yeah, I wanted to do that pig and those eggs. And I'm like, there's these random little notes to myself, and I'm like, the pig and the eggs, yeah, that's right. And that's exciting to me. to go back and look at my notes. And some I'm like, well, I'll revisit that one later. And others I'm like, oh yeah, I am so going to do this one now. So yeah, just start digging through thought files, looking at old notes that you just kind of get tossed aside. But yeah,
Mm,
sticking true to what I want to make,
mm.
not
I
thinking about anybody else, just what I want to make because it is for us. Art is for us. It nurtures our soul, helps us grow, helps us get to that calm space, and then brings us joy. And then as a result, I think that energy's on the piece and it'll bring other people joy.
I do believe the energy's on that piece, and I love what you just said. That's what you sense when you walk into when you see a piece of art, you sense the presence of the person that created it, and their unique personality is always in there. I don't know if you remember that. I was watching the basket weaver. She talked about she took one of the faces and inverted it. Like everybody was looking this way, and she took one
Yes.
and revert, and just so that if someone was really conscious and looked at that basket, they'd go, "Wait a minute,
Yes.
it's not a total pattern. There's someone looking the opposite direction."
Exactly. Yeah, she was really I loved that segment of her and the way she would hold the baskets in the museum. Like they get to hold them because they're meant to be held
Mm,
and
mm.
touched and loved. Yeah. But yeah, American craft. It's so important. Everything that we do when we're creating our visual works is like, yeah, we put a lot of ourselves into them and they're filled with energy. There's no way they couldn't be filled with your energy. And then
Well,
they take on more when the person who either buys it or just admires it, their energy goes into it and their whole relationship with it. And that's what I find. I really love to hear how people relate to a print. Like they'll see a certain one that maybe that one didn't even get picked up all day, but this one person comes in and they just have this thing about this one print. And then we talk about what is in that print and why I put a rooster standing next to this woman at a bar. And it starts a whole dialogue.
well, I hope to see you on that PBS special. Yeah, I would love it. I'd love to see you on there. You can talk about all the history, the cultural inheritance, but also going with your heart and expressing.
Mm.
So, is there anything that we didn't cover in here that you'd like to share about your business, about why you do it, or what you want the listeners to remember?
Well, mainly I think it's just I do what I do because again, it brings joy, but I also love to, like I said, spread the love of printmaking. And it's a very accessible form so that, there's just no end to what you can do with printmaking. So that's kind of a mission. I just love sharing that. So in my studio, when people come into my shop, they'll get to see me printing, they get to see my old presses. And I love to give the history of that. And like I said, Hat Show Print, which is everybody should look up Hat Show Print in Nashville, Tennessee, a 144-year-old letterpress shop that has been continuously operated for that whole time, which is pretty amazing. So that's really
Wow.
it, and just to follow your heart and keep creating.
Well, I love it. I really needed to hear that. I think this last couple weeks, it readjusts me and grounds me. I definitely want to come and see Las Vegas, this cute little town. I
Yeah.
really didn't know about it, and I want to put it on my list. And then also in Nashville, there's another place that people can put on their list. But most importantly, I would tell the listeners to Google search your name, find your book, order a book because they really are wonderful. Uh,
Oh, thank you.
Wonderful and wonderful things to, I think when you have something so special to share with with your children or grandchildren for the holidays are coming up, what a great thing. It's not better than that, than a pig with an egg, I guess. That's what you said.
Stay tuned for that one.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, thank you for being on the Spiritual Artist Podcast. Listeners, be sure to follow this channel on YouTube. I'm also available on all the directories. You can find me on Spotify and Google Podcasts for more and interesting interviews with people like Julie here, which just inspire me and should inspire you to be a spiritual artist. So thank you for listening to the Spiritual Artist Podcast. Welcome to the Spiritual Artist Podcast. This is Chris Miller. I invite you to join me as I interview artists from a variety of disciplines. We'll share powerful stories and lessons learned while making their art.